when you have 8 out of 10 years that are working against you, that's not great odds. I've been a wilderness first responder for 24 years. But I've been a guide. Even when I was a kid, I was a guide. My business, we're accounting guides. There's a lot of leadership that goes with that, mentorship sometimes with clients. Someone makes a mistake on a tour, okay? I said, sure, they'll remember the mistake, but they'll remember how you as a guide reacted to it much more than the mistake.
Happy birthday to you.
Shock, shock.
Hey, Jim, how you doing?
Good, how are you, sir?
Good. You know, some days, 2 cans and a string.
Make life a lot easier, I'll tell you that for sure.
I tell you what, I'm on video calls multiple times a day, and I hate being late anywhere. So yeah. Anyway, so I apologize for the delay on this kind of stuff. So
No worries, we made it work. Thank you for hanging in there and making that adjustment with us.
well, you know, and I looked up. You're in Long Island.
I am, yes.
Yeah. So hey, just my wife's uncle is over in Comac, so say
Wow.
hi to him.
Well, that's funny. Where in the world are you these days?
You know, we're in Helena, Montana,
Nice.
and spent 30 years in Colorado. I grew up in Montana. I grew up on 1,600 acres farm ranch in Montana, and definitely left that lifestyle behind. Way too dangerous, way too hard to work on a day-to-day basis. So, or as I tell people, I said, when you have 8 out of 10 years that are working against you, that's not great odds.
Yes.
Because it's either too hot or too much rain or grasshoppers or hailstorms or, whatever, you name it, it is what it is. So, so yeah, almost 2 years ago, we moved from Denver to, here. My wife actually wanted to move. She's from Rochester, New York. And I said, hey, we could do it now. I mean, we have virtual businesses and things like that. So, so yeah, we get all of the outdoor experiences, but with 1/10 of the amount of people. So
There you go.
yeah, it was a good boat. Yeah, it was definitely a good boat. So, how's everything in your world?
Good. It's really good. It's a good season with some of the summer sports ending right before they start back up again. We got about a month before school starts. So now is like peak summer where we get to really make the most of it. Most of the obligation stuff is over. Now we kind of go into the season of family travel and hanging out in the backyard and just having a day. So this is a good time for me. I enjoy this time probably the most of any time in the year.
Now, how old are your kids now? I saw, a picture of them, with you on your no half cakes. By the way, that's a great story. Yeah, I like how you and I appreciate your decision to move in a healthier direction for everyone. So how old are your kids now?
Sure. A, thank you. B, my son is 10, my daughter is 7.
Nice. Those are
Yeah, it's funny.
great. Well, and I have a background. I was a general manager of an adventure travel company for 11 years in Boulder, Colorado. And so it's a fun age to take kids on travel trips,
Yeah.
because they come back to school, and they retell the story. So they'll remember those trips wherever you might be at. It's, gosh, even if it's the first time to wherever. And yeah, it's special,
Yeah, definitely. I mean, traveling is something we love to do. I know traveling is not for everybody, but our family definitely caught the travel bug. And I think there's so many exciting opportunities to go see stuff and just experience cultures and just be present in the moment. So I am all for it. And yeah, one of the next trips we're planning on taking, or at least I'm planning on taking, is back to Alaska. I don't know if you've ever been, but Alaska is a spot that I've always loved ever since the first time we went there. And I really want to take our kids with us because we went before we had kids. Uh, I think they're of age now where they can really enjoy the experience. So I'm looking forward to doing that at some point soon.
What's your favorite place to go up in Alaska?
We went on a cruise, so you kind of stop a whole bunch of places. I don't know that I have a favorite city necessarily that we visited, but just to me, it's just the beauty of untouched nature there. There's so much just raw beauty, and I think when you can kind of remove the hustle and bustle of like living on an island where everything is busy and commercial, and you go there and it's just serene. It's just a different vibe.
I totally agree. It's been, I would sell trips to Alaska, but I took this is 30 odd years ago, and I have a friend that still lives up in Juneau, and flew up there, and then the only way you can get into Juneau is by ferry or plane, and so took a ferry up to Skagway and then drove Yukon Territory, drive all the way. And then at Seattle, he took off for Montana, and I stopped in Palm Springs, California. So let's say I did a good part of North America. So right there. So, yeah, it's still like one of those epic road trips. So, yeah, I tell you, travel, I've got cool things that are great conversation starters. Is like, one, if you ask anybody, like in an elevator, there's two things you ask is, and they can answer within probably under 2 seconds. What was their first family vacation, and what was their first concert? Those two things, and you get a conversation out of someone. So
Yeah, I would say for sure.
yeah. So in fact, I have a good friend of mine who was a guide for me. His first concert, believe it or not, Woodstock. I mean, how many people? That was he was just an upstate New York guy, and oh, hey, my friends are going to this thing. I'll just jump in the car.
Yeah, it's a heck of a way to start, I guess.
So you never know, and he's a guy that's like, yeah, he's got lots of stories because he just does stuff like that, like, okay, so
That's awesome. So I want to take a minute to actually formally introduce our podcast here, because normally what we would do over on Riverside World is we'd hang out, get to meet each other first. I would formally announce our podcast. We'd get started, introduce my guest. However, today we had a little change of plans. Obviously, we are not on Riverside. We had to shift to Zoom, but champions make adjustments, not excuses, and that's why we are here. So with that being said, I want to at least formally introduce you and our podcast to everyone listening. So just real quick, obviously you are here on the No Half Cakes podcast. For those of you who are new here, Wednesdays I do a full length episode, which is what this is. It's where I will sit down with a guest. We'll have a real raw conversation about the good, the bad, the ugly of life. Talk a little bit about our backgrounds, the things that we've learned along the way. These are typically my favorite episodes. We really don't have a topic to start with. We just are authentic humans having a little bit of authentic connection, and you're along for the ride. Again, my favorite ones by far. Aside from that, Saturdays I do something called a strategy sprinkle. It is meant to be a practical, tactical tip to help you level up in your personal or professional life. Mondays, another short form episode for Mindset Monday, just to give you a little bit of a powerful perspective to carry you through the week. So with that being said, again, we are here on a full length episode. You've already sort of met our guest, but I want to actually formally introduce Mr. Dean Barta. Dean, I appreciate you being here and sharing your life with us.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. Thanks for having me on. I'm always excited to have new conversations with new people. So that's just, part of my DNA. So
I love it. So officially, I know you have a background in business, and then there's some side quests, if you will, through fitness and adventure. I'd love if you could just give us a brief rundown of who you are and kind of how we got here.
Yeah, as I've mentioned, I said, hey, I grew up on 1,600 acres farm ranch in Montana, which for most people that blows their minds on how many 1,600 acres are. But believe it or not, that's a small place in Montana when things are 10,000 acres, et cetera, et cetera. And so always, loving the outdoors, nature, animals. I mean, yeah, if you don't like nature and you're living on a farm, then you're probably not going to live on a farm very long. Um, and just kind of carried that over really in life and through basically a lot of decision making, coming to the fork of the road, take left or right, and got into the outdoor industry and with resorts, national parks, skiing industry, then into adventure travel, and through all that, that's skiing and mountain biking and hiking, and and really just realize that this is such a part of me that one is non-negotiable, won't let go of, and even though I was working in professional jobs, accounting related, management related, and working for Vail Resorts and then smaller family owned companies, is I found the common theme between all of them is I'm a guide, okay, of some sort, okay. Been a guide, been a wilderness first responder for 24 years. But I've been a guide even when I was a kid. I was a guide, um, and so really, I say with like my business, we're accounting guides, because that's just the topic. But there's a lot of leadership that goes with that, mentorship sometimes with clients, and I actually have it's kind of fun. I have a few clients that they they're comfortable with me where they're like, Dean, I just need someone to swear to. They don't have an issue with me or any of my team, but they just want someone to just outpour frustration to. And I'm like, hey, good. I said it, that's good that, you trust me with that. And I said, I'm a good person because I'll let you just, as I say, dump trash on my lawn, but as long as you tell me a joke afterwards, and then I said, and that's something I used to use with my guide staff. Is I said, hey, you're complaining about something that you can complain all you want, and it makes you feel better, but I said it's like dumping trash on my lawn. So I said, what you got to do is tell me a joke so that I'm kind of released of that trash. So anyway, not quite a nutshell, Jim, but it's there's that common theme. Like there's just always, I always have to have, the outdoors. I got to be connected to nature. It just, I will not do without it.
It's very interesting how you phrased the guide part, because being a guide in people's businesses, most people don't think that's a thing. Or you think about a guide on a hiking trail, but not necessarily someone to guide you through an accounting or a financial process. And I think it's a very interesting perspective to have, because it's a great way to really merge your passions and your ability to kind of work with people and lead people and mentor people through a process that might be unfamiliar to them, which is familiar to you. And I think looking at it as a guide is a really interesting kind of perspective there. My kind of follow-up question to that would be, was that always the case for you, or was there like a defining moment where you realized, hey, this perspective I'm working at right now is not it, and you kind of faced in tension where you realized sort of the guide role was more where you needed to be, rather than a traditional, hey, I'm just a financial guy fitting into a mold?
Uh, there's probably several points of realization, whether I was conscious of it or not at the time. But many people would just refer to me, even going back, probably close to 35 years ago, that hey, you're just you're a natural guide, or, and a lot of it was in the context, we were in the outdoors. And, but really, it was just, I mean, it really kind of goes back to finding one's purpose, which is an entirely other conversation, but um, identifying, I should not finding, but identifying really. Um, and so I just, as I realized that, let's just say that I, I said, I built, if you will, an identity around that too, because it's what felt authentic and true to me. Not, I'm not pretending to be anything that I'm not. Okay. Um, and, and so, yeah, it's finally, really when I got out of being, as a general manager for an adventure travel company for 11 years, and I was out of the adventure travel business is when I really realized, hey, I'm a guide in all things, you know? So, that was more of the realization. So, that was more like, whatever, 10, 15 years ago. So, yeah. So, like most things in life, they don't, sometimes things, smack you aside the head like a 2x4. But this was then, a slow trickle that just, oh, okay, I'm gonna keep that piece of me, because that's what resonates with me. So
Makes sense. And from the success perspective, because I think a lot of people look at success in terms of dollars in the bank, right? For a lot of people, they measure whether they are or are not successful based on how many zeros they see in the bank account before the decimal point. But I'm curious for your perspective, especially having a financial background, having some early quote unquote financial success. I'm sure, like, where does that leave you now in terms of your definition of success? Is it purely financial based? Is it joy and happiness? Is it physical fitness? Like, where does success measure for you?
that's always a good question. And being a finance guy, hey, I'm always looking at the bottom line, financial success for me and for others. Okay. Um, and I keep going back to, I think this Denzel Washington stated this before is, you never see a hearse being, a U-Haul being pulled by a hearse. And here's another way I would look at it is, and I challenge anybody who might be listening to this, or even, if you, Jim, is I've never gone to a funeral and heard a eulogy about balance sheet and income statement. If someone has, please call me because, what is it about? This is how this person had an effect on me and others. This is the experiences we had with that person. Um, and it might have been their only impact with, their family, or their community. Um, and to me, that's life's balance sheet and income statement, right? Is how much do you touch other people, and so certainly I can oscillate, but hey, yesterday was my birthday. Okay, I take my birthday off, and we went to a beautiful lake in Montana, and and that I hadn't been before. And one of the beauties is no cell coverage, you know, wonderful. It's almost a quintessential mountain lake. And, you know, that was more rewarding than landing a bigger client, you know, because it was just, my wife, our dog, and nature, jumping in the lake, hiking to a waterfall, you know. I mean, that stuff I'll remember much longer than, oh yeah, that client I landed in July, or whatever, I just well. So and so yeah, I think it's for me, it's just more about experiences, you know, and sharing those experiences too. So
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And when you said that, one thing that popped into my mind was a lot of people may get the wrong picture based on that of, hey, let me just dedicate all of my time to making memories. And I just want to be careful talking about that because you still need to have a successful business, right? We can't just say ignore the profit and the balance sheet and everything else and just loaf off and just go have fun. You need to, the whole premise of this is now have cakes, right? You want to have the whole well-rounded experience in your fitness, your finances, your business, your spiritual life, right? All of these things need to be full. And so, I'm curious from your perspective, like, how do you balance on the daily being an effective leader in the business and also showing up in the home and having that harmony? I'm not a big fan of work-life balance per se. I like harmony better because I feel like balance tends to take away from the other side. So I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
One, I agree with you on the balance. And another person who, through my travels, he shared this with me, and it really has resonated with me. Is and he was not a work-life balance guy. He said, "Hey, life's more like a pendulum, okay? And so you'll swing to where, hey, you got to focus on work or those projects, and then, but you better, it's got to swing back the other direction of like family time or health or whatever, and it is the constant ticking, if you will, of that pendulum going back and forth. That's where the balance lies. Is like, hey, if you took out your day, let's say you have a 16-hour waking day, and you're like, okay, I'm 5 hours with my family, I'm 5 hours with my business, I'm 5 hours with my health. It doesn't work that way, right? Is now, it certainly helps, because there's a step-by-step, day-by-day things that you need, and one of my favorite acupuncturists that was my acupuncturist for, 24 years. She has, and one of my favorite sayings, she said, better health maximizes all life's possibilities. And it's another thing that just has stuck with me because that's why I focus on nutrition and consistent working out. And it's the consistency of that, and you can be consistent about the harmony, with kids and wife, and obligations, and knowing that sometimes, hey, things do get out of balance, or that pendulum swings, but it can't be, the pendulum doesn't stay out here like, hey, I'm working 7 days a week, 12-hour days, and my wife's in the hospital. Oh, that's right, I'll wait another 10 days before I get back to her. No, that just doesn't work. That is not sustainable. Just like it wouldn't be sustainable as like, hey, you're only focused on health and fitness or family. You don't spend any time on your business, and then you start losing clients, or so that's my perspective. It's that pendulum, and you have to understand where it lies, and if you're spending way too much over here, and it could be work or whatever, you got to figure out how can you make that balance work.
Yeah. And I guess going off that same imagery of the pendulum, I think if you spend too much time chasing where the pendulum is and not understanding it's eventually going to move back, and just to kind of live in the moment.
Right. Right.
If you run at a pendulum which is coming back at you, it is going to hit you like a wrecking ball, and your life is going to be a mess. Right. So I think it's important to understand the ebbs and flows of things, and not be so reactionary to, hey, this one period in time right now where things might be a little bit hectic. Understand it's the way that this is right now. Doesn't mean it's going to be the way that it is forever, right? You're not going to make some life altering decisions based on where you're at in this moment, but just, you're going to make the best decision right now. Understand that eventually it's going to flow back. Right. And just trying to be as centered as possible and make educated, non-emotional decisions based on what's best for long-term, rather than continuing to try and waste all your energy chasing the pendulum to the right, chasing the pendulum to the left, trying to catch up to it, rather than just sort of being on it, right? And just living with those ebbs and flows and making the best of each experience.
Yeah.
I think right? So just trying to be present and not let your time and energy get sucked into trying to chase it down.
Boy, that's, you know, that's so, it reminds me of, and Jim, you've been snorkeling before, right?
Yes.
Okay. So you will understand this. Maybe someone who's listening will understand this too. So, snorkeling, especially beginner snorkelers, what do? They're chasing fish, right? Chasing fish. But to really, especially if you say on a snorkeling tour or something like that, I mean, they're going to place you in an area that has a high, likelihood of seeing fish. And how it changes when you just calm yourself and just observe and be in the moment, and how the fish would just come up to me, you know, and it changed the experience because I'm not, you know, not chasing after the fish. You're like, oh, I see that, whatever type of fish, and I don't know, tell me if that resonates with your experience with snorkeling.
It sure does. And it reminds me of the saying, like, if you spend all your time trying to chase butterflies, they're going to keep flying away. But if you spend your time cultivating a beautiful garden, the butterflies will come to you. And I think that's sort of the same thing in trying to build a life that has harmony and peace and joy in it, where you'll start to receive all these benefits, not just trying to be the very best business person as possible and trying to make the most money as possible and forgetting everything else, but trying to chase dollars. You're sacrificing your relationships, your spirituality, your health, all those things. And again, it's where I spent a large part of my life, was chasing a nicer car, a nicer house, a bigger bank account at the loss of time with my kids, relationship with my wife, my physical health. Like, all those things fell off because I was solely focused on that one thing. Right? And it wasn't until I figured out the more I could focus on being a centered person, where I'm happy, I'm joyous, and I'm serving those around me. That's when I started to see growth in all areas, not just growth in one, which was coming at the sacrifice of everything else, but growth in all areas. And the growth that I've had since then in the business has been even better than before, when it was the only focus. Right? So that's why this whole podcast exists, to have these conversations with people, to help them understand it's not just about chasing dollars, but it's about trying to find joy and happiness and purpose, right? Where you can figure out, hey, maybe I need to be not just a financial advisor, but I need to be a guide. It's trying to figure out what is that adjustment in your life where you could find that joy and fulfillment and happiness and still be successful in the business world, but also really, truly be happy. And so I think that's such a critical conversation for a lot of people to have, that they're just not having.
Yeah. Well, it's, say a financial advisor versus guide, and it could be, choose anything you want, IT professional, whatever, teacher, you when you get into, measure that you call, teachers, youth guides. Okay. To me, it's a more emotionally connected term, because if I'm guiding a person on the trail, I'm looking out for their well-being, their safety, and there's certainly times that I'm like, hey, go over there, but when you get to that junction, you stop, or hey, don't take 2 steps to the left, or you're 1,000 feet to hit the deck, literally. And it's I want to come back with the same amount of guests as I left with. That's one of those terms. But to me, that's it's because people really resonate, when they know you authentically care, about their business. And that's how, I do, go about my business. And they say, well, you're an accounting professional or, finance professional. How are you guys different? I said, we take an emotional investment in your business or your nonprofit. And, and I said, we interview you as much as you're interviewing us, because we want to be working with people that are good people and that we care about what's going on, so it's not just a one-way street, like, hey, come work with me, no, it just doesn't work that way. It's about nurturing, long-term relationships, even though we have a business relationship. That's what, matters to me. And I could tell you're a very heart-centered kind of guy. So
Yeah, thank you. And I think to use your teacher as an example, if you look at two different motivations, one would be, yeah, I get to work 10 months out of the year, I get 2 months off, I get these kind of working hours, these kind of benefits, this kind of pay, it's a stable job, blah blah blah, whatever the traditional motivations might be for that, versus someone who genuinely has a passion for helping educate and cultivate the next generation. The output of those two people side by side is totally different, right? And I think there's a tremendous difference when you have someone who genuinely, authentically cares about the thing that they are doing. But I think the biggest part of that, which not a lot of people put the time and energy into, is truly understanding who you are and what motivates you, and what motivates you to be that authentic version of yourself. And so I think the more people who understand who they are authentically and who live that authentic lifestyle, and it's aligned with their 9 to 5 or whatever you want to call it, right? That's when you start to get more centered and have that more purpose-driven life. Would you agree?
yeah, oh, absolutely. In fact, I've even, through my experience and delving into my purpose as well, is, gosh, my purpose was serving me well decades before I was conscious of it. And I have a whole process that I've gone through with people where about basically how to find your purpose and all that. And it's really, it's really liberating, because some people are, oh, I've been doing this and this, and I'm like, well, what's the common theme about what you've been doing? And sometimes I can help identify them, and sometimes they're like, oh, I always have been interested in sharing information, or or they're a learn and share person. Some people will just want to learn it for themselves, but like, I'm a learn and share person. Okay, I learned this, and it's like, that's only half the equation. The other half is I gotta share it. And so learning that, I think that's an important for especially anybody who's stuck, or like they feel like, what's the next step in whatever stage of life they're in, is, help determine, get someone to help you out with, what your purpose is, because that can be, just the weight of the world can be just lifted off your shoulders, because then you're like, oh, hey, here's, where my purpose is. And, oh, there's opportunity here that doesn't align with it, and it's like, oh, I'll take this opportunity because, yeah, that aligns with it, and then, and I've worked all kinds of various jobs, white collar to working on the railroad. Okay. I know the business end of a shovel and all that other stuff, but all of those things contributed to who I am today. So I don't discount that. I don't I don't discount negative people in my life, that have gone through my life. Hey, that's just part of my equation. They're the sum of my, my whole. So now those periods of time, yeah, do they suck? Yeah. But I learned something from it, or I learned something from that person that I either like, hey, I'm not that person, because, I'm this person. And so, yeah, finding your purpose, or what your, guiding light in some people's, or North Star, or whatever, that's it. That can really help out people.
Agreed. Yeah, I think it's important too not to discount those both people who might be in a negative space, or the periods in your life that are less than ideal, because you're not meant to stay there. And I think that's the biggest differentiator, is the people who stay stuck in that. Like, you're meant to have these experiences that help shape you and help bring you closer to who you authentically are. But it's meant to open up your eyes to things that feel good or not so good, right? Not stay stuck in this and say, oh, I'm just meant to live this awful lifestyle, or I'm meant to be surrounded by mud. No, you're not. You're meant to have a purpose-filled life, and meant to spread joy and help really fulfill your gift. but it's important to understand that these things that you go through are really helping to refine you, not to help keep you stuck. So it's just, I think, important to keep that mindset when you're going through it, that these periods in time are not punishment, they're preparation. And I think the more that you're aware of that, the more you can see it in the moment and remind yourself of, hey, this thing that I'm going through right now is temporary and it's meant to bring me to a better spot. What's the lesson in this? Not why me, poor me, this is the worst, right? So I think that's a really important point.
I think
Yeah.
something that comes to mind is, I think it's Jocko Willink that mentioned, like, hey, when things are going bad, he just says, good. And it's because it changes my mindset. Ever since I learned that, I was like, oh, yeah, I mean, hey, I'll kick dirt and, spit and swear. I mean, you name it about the situation. And then as soon as I say good, then I'm like, okay, what's the silver lining of this thing? And how can I be a lot more proactive? Okay, for creating a solution or getting past, through it. Sometimes there isn't a solution. You just got to live through it or whatever. And that's because, hey, still kicking dirt about it months later. Okay, you got to move on. It's not healthy.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes too, the answer is not necessarily just you. It could be the people in your life who are looking at you for how you respond to understand how they might want to respond. When you start to realize it's bigger than just you, I think that's another whole different perspective shift that helps people understand how many people there are that are looking at you, right, to understand how you show up and are seeing that, taking pieces of that to understand how they want to react, how they want to live, either good or bad. So I think it's just all these little perspective shifts. And again, that's the whole purpose of this, is to have these conversations where people who are traditionally successful, right, can talk about, hey, I went through plenty of downtimes. This is what I learned. Not just paint a picture that these are social media highlights where you're climbing a mountain and I'm doing whatever, right? And people think, oh, these guys just have the life because they have it made. But it's, hey, we've been through these situations, and important, I think, now to come back and to guide other people who are sitting in that experience where they may not feel successful, they may not feel purpose driven, they may not feel joy, where they can have resources to come to say, hey, this is where I'm at. Oh, cool. I remember that one conversation where these two people talked about X, Y, and Z. It's a different mindset. Let me try that out. And I think these types of conversations really help move the needle forward for society. So I want to thank you for the vulnerability, for showing up here and giving what you got. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you touched upon something too. You said, it's about how you react. And I used to give a talk, and believe it or not, it was about risk management in adventure travel, which, risk management can be as dry as popcorn. Okay. And 90 minutes, by the way, to college students. But really it was risk management in adventure travel. It was to travel, related, students in that degree. But it really evolved into emotional intelligence and customer service. And the example that I would use is, hey, if someone makes a mistake on a tour, okay, I said, sure, they'll remember the mistake, but they'll remember how you as a guide reacted to it much more than the mistake. Okay. So how you react and how you keep your cool, and it could be a restaurant. You'll choose whatever situation you might have that's a customer service or situation. It's like, hey, the soup is cold. You'll remember how the manager comped your meal, or how the manager was, worked with the situation much more than, oh yeah, the soup was cold. Okay. And it's just a good thing, I think, just in customer service, it's just a good thing in life to remember. And I even, when my wife and I got married, I actually did a little pep talk with everybody and said, guess what? If someone knocks the wedding cake over, okay, what's the first thing that people are going to do? They're going to gasp. But then who do they look to? They're going to look at my wife and me. Like, how do we react? And I said, that's what's going to make the difference. They'll forget about the cake. They might include it with the story, but if Dean goes berserk, they'll remember that for decades. And by the way, that didn't ever happen, but there were certain things that did occur that I reminded, that was a pep talk to myself too, to say, okay, things happen. That's okay. Let's just move on,
Yeah.
So that was important
it
that you
leans a
brought
lot.
that up.
Thank you. I agree. And I think it leans a lot into the difference between fault and responsibility too, because that's not a topic that a lot of people think about in that scenario. They think, man, the cake fell over. Whose fault was it? I'm angry at you. All right, cool. Like being angry at this person or having it be John's fault or Jesse's fault doesn't make a difference. The cake's still on the ground. Like now the responsibility comes to you with how you react to it. Right. So even if it wasn't your fault or was your fault doesn't make a difference. It makes a difference how you respond to it, how you react to it, and how you show up. And I think looking at the difference between fault and responsibility is again one of those little mindset shifts which will take people so far.
Yeah. I think that's important because for me, that moves me through the stress faster because I'm like, hey, it's all on me on how I react. And that because, hey, believe me, I've gone down that accusatory path before, and it's like, no, it just doesn't, it's like injecting poison into my veins, honestly. So,
yeah. I mean, it's a conversation I've had with my kids a bunch of times, which, sort of feels like it's built into them to feel bad for a thing like knocking over a drink on the table.
Yep.
I could sit there and yell at you for being clumsy, or I can just help you clean it up. Like you already feel bad. Me being upset at you, it's all your fault, or yelling at you for that doesn't make you feel any better. Right? It's not going to prevent you from doing it in the future. It's going to make you feel more upset and less likely to come to me when there's a problem because you feel like you're going to get yelled at. And I think that's yet another thing that we got to look at and how we show up for other people, because those little things make such a big difference in that conversation and how people show up for each other.
That's another great point, Jim, because you also don't know whether it's your child or a full-grown adult, how much that person acknowledges that mistake, okay, and they're already into self-punishment. So if you're piling on, and this is a total projection, by the way, is, I've had people like, I'm like, don't pile on me. I said, I've already beat the hell out of myself over that incident. So, you please be more supportive because, it's beat me down, but, I'll do a reversal where, okay, I've already beat myself in. Well, if someone comes in with a verbal punch, then I get in defensive mode. So, and I just, my friends or family know that about me, and some people don't, because you come across someone you don't know really well, you don't know how much they're self-inflicting.
Right.
So.
Yeah. And I mean, look, every person you interact with every day is dealing with something, right? Even the person at the McDonald's drive-thru taking your order. You don't tend to think about the fact that they have a real life and they have real struggles, and they may be different than your struggles. To you, their struggles might not be a struggle in your perspective, but to them, it might be the biggest thing in the world, right? So how we show up and interact with other people and give them grace to be who they are and let them just, deal with their struggles and be as supportive and joyous as we can, right? Rather than being critical and being upset at that person because they forgot to put the fries in your bag. Like the more we show up as patient, kind, loving, supporting people, right? And I know it's really hard to do, but I tend to talk about this a lot, is that most people just want to feel loved, appreciated, seen, and heard. And for a lot of people, they don't get that from their typical sources, whether it's their parents, their friends, their social media. A lot of people are lacking tremendously in all four of those departments. And so when they can feel that, and when they have a healthy supply of that coming in from all the places that, they commonly interact with, they are more tolerant, they are more joyous, they are more patient, they are more kind, because they have that coming in. right? But we as a society tend to operate from a place of lack in those things. That I think it's important for us to show up as examples, as leaders in our family, in our community, in our businesses, where we can help people feel that, right? And a lot of people aren't even cognizant of that themselves. But once they understand, hey, that's what you want, that's what you're ultimately craving. And I mention this as an example a lot. My kids, and if you've ever seen kids in a pool, you'll probably be familiar with this example. And it happens other places, but to me, the most vivid one is the kid in the pool. Your kids jumping off the diving board and they say, "Dad, look at me." And they do a little twirl and they jump in the pool. And what is the first thing they do when they come back up above the water? They look at you to make sure that you were looking at them, right?
Right.
And that's what most adults are still doing. They just want someone to see them do this thing. And we look around and there are not people looking back at us to congratulate us on how well we're doing or what we're doing or are we doing the right thing. And we are just all still adults walking around looking for that love, appreciation, to be seen and to be heard. And so I feel like when we can consciously be aware of that and the lack that a lot of people have of that, the more that we can give that and contribute to that, man, it just makes so much stuff flow so much easier.
Yeah. Oh, it's such good points, Jim. And, really is, are we the person that pounds the brick on top of someone or takes it off?
Right.
And that encouragement or, and that bit, checkout lines are like the person's frustrated. There might be training. I go, "Oh, I'm so sorry it's taking us so long." And I said, "I'm not in a hurry." And I laugh. I'm like, "That's okay. Just, you're training. That's fine." I'm not in a hurry, and maybe the person behind me might be in a hurry, but, yeah, it just relieves the situation. And I mean, one of the fun things I do, let's say it's Christmas time and you're going to the post office to mail packages. Okay. And everyone's walked into and there's a line of whatever, 25 people or whatever. And the first thing you get to go, 25 people. And I don't know where I adopted this, but I just did one day. And I went, I said, "This is where the cool people are hanging out today." And everybody just starts laughing. And I'm like, so I do that ever since. And people, I don't know. I get a laugh out of them, maybe only for a moment or whatever, but it's a perspective. That's all.
100%. I think, just to share one other example, which I realized the other day when I was driving. You ever, when you're driving on the highway or whatever, look at the cars you're passing next to you and just imagine what that person's world is like for a second while they're sitting there behind the steering wheel based on their face or based on whatever else. Driving down the road the other day, I passed the car and you could tell this person was just pissed off, like just miserable, in a mean face on, just unhappy. The next car I passed, the person singing, dancing, like singing out loud to whatever song they're listening to. And it made me think about the fact that these two people are living in the same reality. Like we all live in the same reality space, but they are having two totally different experiences based on how they're showing up. And obviously they're both dealing with different things, and I don't want to take either of that away from them. But once you realize the reality is largely the same, it depends on how you show up and in your perspective within the reality. You sort of understand that you can control, to an extent, how you show up in it. And how you choose to look at things is going to change your reality. There was no different reality from car to car. They both existed in the same world, but they had totally different emotions, totally different feelings. And so if you can find joy and find reasons to be happy and look at it from a different perspective of not, man, I don't want to wait in a line full of 25 people to mail this package, but look at how many people around me in my community have people that they love that they can send things to or receive from. It's a totally different shift, right? And I think that little mindset shift helps you just receive a little bit more joy, and right? And you get that little 1% from all these different areas in your life, and you start to look at things differently. You start to build up this positive experience, and that helps build you so much more positive momentum, and it just gives you a better perspective and a better foundation to look at other stuff from. It helps you feel that loved, appreciation, seen, and heard. So, man, this has been a great conversation. I appreciate it tremendously. And I have two more quick follow-up questions, if I could.
Oh, sure.
Question number one, if you could give someone a small piece of advice, a little actionable tip that they can help improve the quality of their day today, what would that little bit of advice be?
Connect with nature today in any form. Sit under a tree, touch a tree, take your feet off, your shoes off, and put your feet in the grass. But just connect with nature, even if it's for a minute. And it's so, because hey, we're natural beings. We're part of the natural environment. All this technology, which can be wonderful, but also a curse. But guess what? Nature it connects with you. It doesn't care what kind of day you're having. It's there to support you, right? Especially grounding, like ground. Yeah. Connect with nature.
Great advice. That's definitely, I'll give you that. It's not a common answer to that question. And I really appreciate that, because that's really good advice. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
My second question, which this is the first time this has happened, you said yesterday was your birthday.
Yeah.
So happy birthday.
Thank you.
My second question is, talk about cake. Cake is obviously a big topic of this show based on the No Half Cake experience. What is your favorite type of cake? And is there any type of core memory attached to that?
Oh gosh. I've gone through, I definitely appreciate cake. Actually, and tell you the truth, yesterday was the first time I didn't have cake for my birthday. And it was literally, and I have a video of it because my wife took a video of it, is a candle in a half of a watermelon. And I was, because I've, both of us have been very, working on, better nutrition. And hey, 90 days ago, our nutrition was still better than probably the standard American diet. But, so I had watermelon, but, cake, gosh, I've had tiramisu on my birthday as my cake, which that is my, be my go-to. Gosh, anything probably chocolate related is probably is still a pretty good go-to. But I keep switching it up, and last year was tiramisu, and it started out the day with cake. Like, why should I wait till the end of the day? It's like, so this year it was watermelon, and hey, watermelon might be a continuing thing. Who knows?
There you go. You never know. We'll have to have a special edition of the No Half Watermelons show coming up soon.
Sounds good. Well, Jim, thank you very much for the time. It's great connecting with you. I feel like I know a lot more about you and how you go about your life. And, you're doing good work out here. And, keep up the good work. And hey, doing these podcasts and all that is, I know how much work that takes and stuff. So, hey, always connect. And hey, you're ever in Montana or need, travel advice, I know you're big, you and your family like to travel. Yeah, just dial me up, okay? Because
sounds like a plan.
I'll point you in the right direction. I'm a guide. Hey,
I love it. I appreciate your time. Thank you, sir.
All right. Thanks very much, Jade. Take care.
Have a good one.
All right, bye.